Everyone. This is Professor E. And today's lecture, we are going to discuss the last chapter, chapter 7, about arrays. So, as always, there are always videos here that explain the concepts. Here it talks about functions and arrays. And also, we're going to be talking about vectors. So, a vector basically is just like a flexible version or dynamic version of array, because array is fixed. But vector, you can expand the array or shrink it. We'll talk about this in a few minutes. So why do we have to talk about arrays? So every time we talk about concept, we have to kind of discuss why it is important to talk about it. So for array, we talked about variables. But what about if we have, or if we need to have multiple variables? Let's say I am a teacher or an instructor, and I need to have multiple variables to keep track of my students' grades. So I need a variable for every student I have, which means if I have 15, 20, 30 students, I need to have 30 variables. So it's going to be very difficult to keep track of that. So that's where the array comes into play. The array allows me to use multiple values, but using only one single variable. I'll give you an example here. Let me switch to Visual Studio, just making sure that we are sharing the same page. So as I said, when you have multiple values, like for example here, grade 1, and then grade 2, then grade 3, and then you keep going all the way to grade 30. So that's going to be very difficult to keep track of that. So that's why the program C++ and also other programming language allow us to use a big container called array that can take multiple values, but you can use only one variable. But how can we differentiate between a regular, a normal variable and array? By using this symbol. So when you put this symbol, square brackets, and then you put the name of the array, I'm going to call it grades. So I just create an array. But you have to specify how many elements you have in here. So for example, here, I need to put, for example, 6. Okay. Now, in Java, that would be in a Java language, that would be acceptable, kind of. But in C++, you have to put that after the name. So here I'm going to put 6. See? So what does this mean? That means I am declaring or defining, declare an array that will take 6 values of type integer. Okay? That's but just by typing this. Okay? Because I don't know what the grades are, so I put 6 in there. That means, okay, I have intention to use an array that can take 6 values. And then you can start assigning these values, because by default, all of them are zeros. 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. And then you're going to start and put, okay, in the first one, put 0. 0 means that's the first. It's like we have here. Let me show you here. So it's like you have an array, but it has only 0, 6 zeros like this. So that's basically what you have here. Okay? So at this point, that's what you have. You have an array, but by default 0 because we did not assign. And then you can assign them individual. Like the first one, I have 90. And then remember, the first one has an index 0. We always start from index 0. I know it's kind of a little bit confusing for some people, but we don't start from 1. Okay? So that's why a common mistake is people, they put 1, assuming it's the first element, but that's the second one. And then grades 1 is the second one. Okay? So if I put 85 here, Okay, now the first two are not 0 anymore, are 90 and 85, and the rest is 0. How do I know that? Okay, let me try to use the loop. I'm going to go from 0 all the way to 6. And then one by one, I'm going to print. Okay, so I'm going to print the array. Grades I. Little space. Okay, so this basically I'm going through the entire array and printing every single element from 0, which means grades 0, grades 1, grades 2, grades 3, grades 4, grades 5. 5 is the last one because 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, these are 6 numbers. Okay, so don't equal, that's why I put less than 6, but I didn't put equal. So I can either put less or equal 5 or put less than 6. That means I'm not including 6 because there is no index 6. The last index is 5. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These are 6 numbers. So if I run the program, you're going to see that the first two numbers, oh, okay, I have here only the first two. So the last ones are not assigned. They put the memory value in there. Okay, so here by default, so you have the first two they change, but the last one does still have the memory address. So let me change them. Grades 2 is 70, and then grades 3 is 55, and then grades 4 is 60, and then grades 5, which is the last one, I'm going to put 100. So if you run it, now you should have all the values. So this is only one way of doing it. Now, what about if I already have all the values? Maybe the easy way is not to put them individually. It's going to take a long time, a lot of typing. I can just put the braces here. So I can put equal and then just mention, like list the grades, like 85, 90, okay, 60, 75, 82, 100, and 60. Okay, so 2, 4, that's one extra. Okay, so if you have all the values, now the best way is just list them, as you can see, using the braces. Okay, if you don't have, okay, if you don't have them, that means you know that you're going to be using 6 spots, then you're going to put grades 6 and then semicolon. That means, and then you can start adding them whenever you have access to them. Okay, so that now what about if I don't, even if I don't have 6? Okay, so 6 tells me how many, but if I have the list of all the numbers, then 6 is not required because the program can figure out how many numbers I have. So I'm going to run the program with no problem. See, because the program will figure out how many I have. Okay, so that's how we print and then you can change. Let's say, okay, I have all of them here. And then you can change anytime. You can change the first one, you can change the last one. So these numbers, these values, you can change them as long as you mention the index, the location. Okay, you put the square brackets and then you mention the location. Now, what about if I want to add them up? Let's say I want to calculate the total and the average. So you're going to do the same thing using the loop, calculate the sum of all the grades. So I'm going to use always this. Now, I can just use a variable for that. I can put, and by the way, that variable or that number that you have here, it has to be constant. That means when I declare the variable, I have to mention constant because it cannot change. Once you specify that number, you can never change it. That's why I'm going to put here, let's say num grades, okay, equals 6. So now I'm going to put this one right here, num grades. So keep that in mind. It has always to be constant. If I don't, then I'm going to have a problem here. See, it's going to be underlined. That means you need to make sure it is declared as a constant so it can never change. It's like a classroom. So when you go to a classroom, so whatever number of computers, number of chairs you have, that's going to be constant for the entire year. It's not going to change unless they have like a very, you know, like a renovation or something. But almost every year you're going to have the same number. If you have 30 computers, so you're going to have always the same number of computers or the same number of chairs. Okay, so it has to be fixed, and that's what makes an array different than vector that we're going to be talking about. Vector you can shrink it, you can expand it, but array you can never change it. You can change the values, but you cannot change the length. Okay, so as I said, we're going to calculate the plot. So I'm going to put here double sum equals 0. So I have to declare a variable, and then I'm going to use the same thing. Look, I'm going to copy this to show you it's the same loops I'm going to be using, but I'm not going to print. I'm going to add them up with sum. So always to add them up, we always put plus equal. That means keep adding. Add the first one, add the second one, and put grades I. Remember, I keeps changing, right? It starts from 0. That means the first one, which is 85. And then it's going to go to 1. That's 9. Grades 2, 60. Grades 3, 7, and so on, all the way to grades 5. So that's going to add up all the numbers. So now outside the loop, I have the sum already. So I can put the total of all grades is, and then I'm going to put the sum. Okay, so if I run the program, it's going to add, of course, I have to start a new line. So all of them are 492, which just sounds to be right. Some here, I'm just going to start a new line. And by the way, also, let's say here I just listed the grades, okay? But I'm going to put it as a comment. What about if I get this information from the user? I can do that. So I'm going to put grade, okay? And then I'm going to use the loop equals 0, I less than 6, and then I plus. And then I'm going to ask the user, this is if you want to get the information from the user, and once you get that information, you want to add it to your array. So because you already have the list, that's why I want to put it as a comment in case, in case like you have to prompt the user to enter this information. So I'm going to put here, enter the grade. And of course, this will be repeated many times. Okay, and then we're going to put CIN grade, and then once you get that information, then it's time to assign it here. See, and then it goes. So this is if you want to prompt the user to enter the information. So if I don't have this, then I'm going to use this part of the code. So I can ask the user enter the grade. I'm going to receive it, save it in the variable, and then assign it to the array. Okay. So it doesn't matter. There are different ways you can have that information. Okay. So now the total, it does not tell me anything, right? Because 492, it doesn't tell me whether the class is doing good or not. So I may need the average. So I'm going to put here calculate the average. So I'm going to use the same thing, but I already calculated the sum, so I don't have to do it again. So I just have to put the grade is, I just have to put sum divided by the number of grades. Now, somebody may say, why didn't you put 6? What about if I change that 6? So here, it's better to put the variable, because if I happen to change the number of grades, I don't have to go back and then change it in every single statement. I can just go all the way up and then change it right here. See, right here. So you can, let's say you change it, just put, I'm going to put here, let's say 6, 10, okay? or whatever the number is. So I don't have to change anything else, okay? But if you put like a particular number, then if you change, then you have to go back and check every single statement and see if every time you see 6, change it to whatever the new number is. So that's going to be a lot of work, a lot of code. So now we have the average. So I'm going to divide it by whatever the number of grades is, which happens to be 82. So that's a very good information. 82 is not that bad. Okay. And by the way, there is also a different way. I'm going to call it alternative way of accessing the values of an array. It is called enhanced, using enhanced. So what do I mean by that? Okay, can you see here? I use this loop to print, and I use also the same loop to add up the values. Now there is a different way which is easier in case you want to. You don't have. That's why I call it alternative way. If you want to, like for example, to print, I'm not going to put that loop. I'm going to put a different loop that is very simple. I'm going to put the type, the data type of the array. So the data type of arrays you can see right here, it's int. So that's the one I'm going to use. That means what kind of values you are dealing with. It's integer. So you put int, and then you come up with one variable name. It in any variable. I'm going to call it gr. And then look here, I'm not mentioning starting point 0 or no. I'm just going to put colon like this. That means go from the beginning to the end of the array, whatever the end might be. And then put the name of the array, which happens to be grades. And then print. Print what? GR. So GR refers to every single grade in my array. So here there is no mention of the index. So here, if you go all the way up, I have to mention 0, right? 0, 1, 2, 3, grades 0. So in the alternative loop, don't mention any, like there is no reference of I or the index. So just put GR, that's it. Let me just put like this space. So this will give me the same answer as this. It's just without mentioning the index. So I'm telling the program, listen, go from the beginning to the end in this array, grades. Now GR will replace the first, the second, the third, whatever it is, okay? So throughout the entire array. So as you can see, we're going to get the same output. It's just in different ways. You can see right here. So I just have to start a new line here. So you can see it in a separate line. So as you can see right here, it's the same thing, just using, see, I have all the grades using an alternative way. So it's called enhanced loop. Sometimes they call it for each loop. What they call it for each loop, that means for each element in the array, do this. And the same thing for the total. So as you can see, for the total, I don't have to use this. So I can use the same thing, which is right here. Now let me use a different variable because I don't want to mess up with the first one. So I'm going to put total. So the first one I called it sum, right? So now I'm going to use the alternative way, which is for the type integer gr. I don't have to call it gr. Give it any name. I'm going to call it none. And then grades has to be the name of the array. And then add sum plus equal. Now in the first, the traditional one, I would put this, grades I. Now for this one, there's no mention of I. You just put the name of the variable that you have, which is none. So this will give me the same thing as this, exactly the same thing. It's just different ways. So if you feel like you're going to get confused, forget about this. Okay, just focus on. But I highly recommend you're going to like it because it saves your time, and then it's good to know like a different way to do this. Now let me explain something here. When you are using the enhanced loop, which is the alternative way, it allows you only to access. It does not allow you to change the values. What do I mean by that? If I try to change, let's say for example, I'm going to change everything to 0. So it looks like, okay, I'm changing all the grades to 0 because I'm going for each grade in the array, changing to 0. So this will not take effect. It's not going to create an error or exception, but it will not be executed. That means you're not going to see grades to 0. Let me show you here. So if I try to print, let me use this. So this is for printing, right? So if I use it, let me see if the grades will become 0. Okay, let me start new here. So that's very clear. So if I run the program, look if I'm going to see the grades here. So as you can see, the grades, they never change. Why? Because I cannot use the enhanced loop to change the values, okay? Only to access them, okay? So it allows me to access them, but not to change them. But if I use the other one, it will allow me to change. Look, I use the I, next to non-grades, I plus plus. If I choose this to assign it 0, it will take effect. So if I put this, now let's see if I'm going to get 0. And sure enough, look, all of them are 0. So the only way, that's basically the bottom line, is if you want to change the value, you have to choose, or you have to use the traditional loop, the one that you are familiar with I, like that's mentioned the index. But you cannot use this enhanced. Okay, this is just an alternative way. It should not be. Okay, so we just learned first, let me just kind of summarize. We learned about how to create an array. So this is an array. Let me create another type. Let's say I want to keep track of the names of the students. So in this case, I'm going to use string because the names are not an integer. And I'm going to call it students with S. And then I'm going to use the brackets. Again, I can put the number here, or if you have the list, then you don't have to. The program will figure it out. So I can put, for example, John, this one, and then say Monica, and then Steve, and then David, and then K. So we have two, one more, and then we can put here, okay? So that's another array, but it's not an array of integer, it is an array of string, okay? I can have any kind of array, I can have it a character. You can put char, and then you can put I. Say we'll call it letters, okay? The same thing you can put, but in this case, it has to be single quote. So let's say I want to keep track maybe of the letter grades. You can do that. So I'm going to put, for example, let's say B plus 85, and then we say A plus 960 is F. 75 is C, and then another B, and then A. See? So we have three different array of different type. The first one is of type integer, string, and then character. You can also have Boolean, you can have a double, so you have any type you want, okay? So, and also we learn how to assign values to our array. So most of the time you're going to be using the loop because it's faster, but you can do it individually as I showed you earlier, one by one at a time. But you can prompt the user to enter as I showed you here. So here you can prompt the user to enter this information and then you assign them using the loop. So for example, if you have cells, you know, and they want to have like a bunch of salespeople and you want to enter the sales amount, how much money they made, you can do the same thing. In this case, most likely it's going to be double. And then also we learn how to add up these values We also learned about alternative way of accessing our values using the enhanced, as you can see. And I can use that one to adapt the values and print them. But remember, you cannot change them. Now, what about if I want to find, let's say, the highest value in array? I'm interested in the highest value. The first one, I need a variable, because once you find the highest value, you have to say it. So I'm going to put highest. Now, in this case, the grade cannot be negative, which means I'm going to start with the smallest number possible, which is 0. But only in this case, okay? So if I have a situation in which negative numbers are possible, then you cannot start with 0, because 0 is not the possible, the smallest possible value. But here I can. And then I'm going to use the loop. Look, this loop will be using it over and over. And also we can use also the enhanced loop here, because we're just accessing, we're not changing. So I'm going to say here, look, I'm going to start from the first one. So the highest will be is a variable that holds the highest, which means I'm going to start from the beginning, okay? And then I'm going to start comparing every single grade to the highest. Every time the grade is higher, I will save it in highest. So I'm going to start if grades I is higher than highest, then make sure you save it in the variable highest, that number that you just found. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So let's say here, this is our grades, right? So I'm going to start, let me put it just right here. So I'm going to start with highest. So highest is 0. Then the first one would be grade 0, right? Grade 0. So what is grade 0? Is 85. So I'm going to compare according to the loop. Grade 0, is it higher than highest? 85, is it higher than 0? Yes. So in this case, this 85, which is grade 0, should be assigned to highest. That would be 85. Okay? Now I'm done with the first one. Now let's move on to grade 1. What is grade 1? Is 9. I'm going to compare again. Is grade 1, which is 90, higher than highest, which is 85? Yes. Again, this 90 assigned to highest. And then you're going to continue. A grade 2. Is it higher, which is 60? Is it higher? So this is 60. Is it higher than 90? No, nothing will happen. That's why I don't have else here. That means we are only interested if the number is higher. If it's less, nothing will change, okay? So as you can see right here, and then I'm gonna go to the next one, which is grade 3. Which is grade 3? That's 75, no change, right? So I'm gonna move on to grade 4. What is grade 4? 82, no change. Now I'm gonna go to the last one, grade 5. What is grade 5? That's 100. So is grade 5, which happens to be 1, is it higher than 90, which is highest? Because that's what we have here. Grades 5, I, because now I is 5. Is it higher than 80 and 90? Is it higher? Yes. So highest will be that number that you just found, which is 100. So that's what we have here. So 100 will be assigned to highest. So that's basically how the program, this is the algorithm to find the highest. Okay. So after we go through this process that I showed you, now we can print the highest. The highest grade is highest. Okay. So let me start new line here. So now let me run the program, see if the highest grade is 100. Oh, it says 0. What happened? Maybe that's a problem. So I put grades, I put highest is 0. If grades I is higher than highest, then highest should be grades. Oh, remember that we changed it to 0 and I forgot to. Remember that? So I need to do to change this because that's the one that put everything to 0. Remember that? So I was just showing you how to that enhanced loop does not change the values, but I forgot to change them back. Okay, now let's run the program and see that the highest is 100. Now what about the minimum, the lowest? You're gonna do the same thing. So you start with the variable. So find the lowest grade. So you're gonna do the same thing. I can just copy this to show you the same algorithm, but the opposite way. So I'm gonna put here. So I'm gonna put lowest. Now, lowest, you start from the highest number possible, which is 100 in this case. And then you're gonna change to less than, and of course the variable will be lowest. So when you are looking for the highest, you have to start from the lowest number possible. If you are looking for the lowest, then you start from the highest number possible. The lowest. Now, what about if I don't know what number 100 or so there is variable for that. Like for example, I can start from the lowest integer possible, and there is a name for that. It's called int min. See? And then if I'm looking for the lowest, I'm going to start from the opposite, which is int max. See? So if you don't know what the value, so the grade, it was easy. But what about if I have other situation? I'm not sure about the highest and the lowest. So you can use this constant from, or from C++ provide us with this information. Okay, so the lowest, as you can see, now we know how to find the highest and the lowest, okay? And also I can go backward. I can print the values for the grades backwards. So also I can go, but in this case, look at the loop. I'm going to start from where? I'm going to start from num grades -1. Why? Remember, num of grades is 6, but the last index is 5. So you always, why? Because when you start counting how many grades, of course we count from 1. But when it comes to index, you start from 0. So there's that difference of 1. So you have to be careful. And then I'm going to go backwards. I'm going to change this symbol to higher or equal than 0. And then you go minus, minus. So this will allow me to go in the opposite direction. So now I'm going to print. I'm going to put C out. And then grades are maybe not that. So now let me print and see if I'm going to get the grades in opposite direction, in reverse. Okay, let me see here. It looks like, oh, I did by mistake. I deleted the end of the array. See that? Of the main section. Can you see it? So at the bottom by mistake. So I'm going to put return 0 and then close. Right? It was deleted by mistake. Okay, so as you can see, this is in reverse. So this is basically how the array works. Okay. Now, okay, there is another one called the vector. Vector is just a flexible way because this array is fixed. I always have 6. Okay, and then I cannot change it. If you change, you have to create a different one. But the vector is an array, but is kind of flexible. But to be able to use it, you have to add this. Include, then you put it with vector. Okay? So you have to add this on top. So how does the vector works? So vector, you put, okay, vector, and then you put the type like this, and then you put the name. So let's say I'm going to put salespeople. Let me put it as that. And then I'm going to put sales in matrix. See? Now, as you can see here, I don't have to specify the number because when you start from 0. So here, let me show you that if I put cells amount, then they have some functions. One of them is size. That tells me how many elements I have. Because it just started by default, it is 0. As you can see right here, it's 0. And then you can add. And then, of course, the more you add, the bigger the size. Okay? How do I add? We use a function called pushback. So you put push, as you can see right here, pushback. So pushback means add. And then you put the number here. Let's say I want to put 25,000. And then we can just copy this and then add as many as it. Again, the more you add, the size. So I can put, let's say here, 4300. This is 52, 50. Okay. So now if I copy this and then print it here, of course, the size will be different. It's not going to be the same because you added 3, so the size is 3 now. It's not 0. Okay? Now somebody may say, what about if you want to delete? Okay? If you delete, always delete the last one. Cells, amount, and then what do you put? Pop back. See? Pop. So push back to add. Pop back is. Now I don't have to specify the number because by default you are deleting the last element. So here I'm deleting 52,450. Okay. So if I want to print, I'm going to do the same thing. I can even use the enhanced loop. I put double. Why do I put double? Because the vector is of type double. See? And then I'm going to put value. So I can name it anything I want, and you put the colon, and then you put the name of the vector or the array. In this case, vector, cells, amounts. Same, it's the same. So that's the good thing about in the, what do you call it, the enhanced loop. You don't even know whether you are dealing with array or vector because they look exactly the same. So if cells amount happens to be an array, you're gonna type it exactly the same. So now I'm gonna put here, I'm gonna print to show you that. So I'm gonna print value. Okay. So let me start a new one here. Confusion. So if I run the program, it's gonna show me the values that I have. Again, you don't see the last one because I deleted it. The last one by using pop back. So push back is to add, and then pop back. And by the way, you can also use the square brackets that we use. For example, instead of using this, like for example, instead of using this, I can use the original or the traditional loop. Let me show you. I'm going to put here I equals 0, I all the way to cells, whatever the size is. Cells amount less than cells amount and then size. So here, that's the good thing about vector, because in the array, we don't know how many elements, or at least like the program does not have a function that can tell us. I mean, we can save it in a variable, but we don't have a function like here called size that tell us exactly what the number of elements is. So here, look, I cannot use value. I'm going to use cells amount, like just the array. You can put I. So this is just like the array here. So you can use it in both. So here you can put cells amount. Let me see here. I forgot to close this. And then cells amount is S. So let's see if it's working. If I run the program, so it's the same thing. It works in both cases. Okay. So you can either use the enhanced loop, or you can use just like array. So you put it the same way. Okay. So that's the good thing about a vector. So here you have two ways of saving or storing information. Of course, the most common one is the array. But vector, because sometimes, or many times, my students ask me the same question. Which one is the best to use? Is it the array or vector? And my answer is always the same. It depends. They don't like my answer. But if, of course, because it depends what situation we're dealing with. So if we're dealing with a situation that is stable, then array is probably the best tool to use. But if you need some flexibility to add and then delete, and then you're going to be adjusting a lot, then vector would be a good choice for you. So you can never say for all the time that okay, array is always better than the vector or vice versa. It just depends on the situation. They're just tools like any other tool. It's like a mechanic, which of the tools it's your favorite. Well, I need all of them. It depends what problem I'm dealing with. Then I have to use the right tool. That's exactly what we are talking about here. You need to use the right tool. Okay? So this is basically how we use the vector and then array. And again, as I mentioned, there is a video that talks in detail about each one of them. So function arrays, in case I missed something, and then the vector, and then the 2D array. The 2D array, I'm going to give an example here. I'm going to end with this, is when you have, and then by the way, I took off the assignment, the programming assignment about 2D array. I removed it from the D2L, so you don't have to worry about it. I just left the question or the programming assignment about arrays, okay? Because I know it's kind of, a lot of, we don't have a lot of time. So I'm just trying to help as much as I can. But it is very important that you know how the array works, the 2D array. 2D array basically is an array of arrays. So for example, here, I'm going to go to very quick. So for example, if you have, so when I talked about grades, that's only for one class. But what about if I have 3 classes and I want to keep track of all of them? How can I do that? So that's where the 2D array comes into play. So I'm going to put here grades, but instead of using 1, you're going to use 2. I'm going to say, okay, I have 3 classes, for example, and I have, just to make it simple, and I have 4 students each. So 3 by 4, that means 3 rows, and every row is an array. And the second number is how many you have for each. So for example, I can put, so this is the big one, and inside you have, so this is 3, that's the first one, first class, second one, and the third one here. And then inside each one of them have to come up with 4 numbers. So I'm going to say, for example, 80, 70, 60, and then 9. Okay. Here I'm going to put, let's say, 20, 40, 30, 10. Okay. And then here I'm going to put 80, 85, 90, 95. So this is an example of 2D array. Okay. So remember, it is an array of arrays. Instead of like having an array of string, we have an array of small arrays. Now, how do we access each one of them? So we need to have 2 indexes. Before we had only 1. So now we're going to have 2. So for example, if I want to access this 9 right here, how can I? So I need to refer to the first one, which is grade 0, right? So grade 0 means what? Means this array. Grade 0 means this. And then within grade 0, which element? 0, 1, 2, 3. Say put 3 here. That means, okay, that means the one at index 3 within the first one. So this will print the 9, as you can see here. See? And then if you want to print the entire thing, now you need more than one loop, you need two. So I'm going to put print all grades. So I need two of them. Okay. So the first one to keep track of the rows, because the best way is, I like this way. If you put them on top of each other, so they look like a table, so it's easy to manage, manipulate. So as you can see here, this is much better because I know how many rows. I have three and I have four columns. So I'm going to use I for the row 0, 1, 2, and then the column 0, 1, 2, 3. So I'm going to put here 4, and let me call it R, so because it refers to the row. So it's going to be 0, R less 0, 1, 2. So I have three rows. I'm going to put 3, which means 0, 1, 2, and then plus. And then I'm going to use the second one. That means for every row. Remember, every row is a class. So this is, okay, let's say class 1. And this is class 2. And this is class 2. Okay. So I'm going to say, okay, for every row here, you see now it is, where is underline? Okay. Oh, I forgot to come. Okay, so for every class, for every row, for every array, and here for every grade that class. So here we're talking about the column, right? 0, C less than 4, because 4 is not included. So 0, 1, 2, 3, because we have 4 columns. C plus C. So you have to have 2 loops to access them. And then I can put C out. And you have to mention now 2. One for the R, and the other one is for C. And then you can just put, okay, this space. And then after I finish one class, I can start a new line here. See that? This way I can separate them. Otherwise, if you don't have this line, then all of them will be in one line. Maybe they don't look good. So let me run the program. You're going to see. Say I have the grades part of here. Of course, the first number is from the previous statement. So I'm going to put a line. And now I have, so it looks like a table. It's just like a table, like a matrix, like if you cover matrix in math. So it's very similar. So you have rows and columns. And I can do the same thing. Like let's say I want to calculate the total, I can do the same thing. Find the total of all of them. And then also for each class. Let me start with them. To show it's the same thing, I'm just going to copy this. And then I'm going to add them up. So let's say I want to know what's the average or the total of all of them. So I'm going to put sum 0. And then instead of printing, I'm just going to add all the values. Sum grades. Again, we have to mention the row and the column number. Now I don't need to, because I'm not printing, I'm just adding numbers, so I don't need this. And then I can find the average. Okay, so I'm going to put here, okay, the total, okay, first one we find total of all grades is whatever value you have in sum. Now my question, how can I find the average? So I have to know how many rows, how many columns, but the easy way is to have a variable to keep track of your grades. So I'm going to call it count. And then right here, I'm going to put count plus plus. This means every time you added one grade, make sure you keep track of it. So this way, I'm just going to put, it's better to have sum as double, but we don't have to worry about division. And then I'm going to put average out. The average grade is sum divided by count. So that's going to give me the average of all classes combined. So if you run the program, it's going to give me the 62. So 60 to 5 is kind of, I don't know, misleading, or maybe it's not accurate enough. Why? Because it doesn't tell me, because maybe like if you look at this last class, they're doing great. So 62.5 is not giving me good information. So it's better to have an average for each class. So that's why I'm going to go right here. I'm not going to put sum. I'm going to put it right here, 0. That means every time you finish with one class, make sure you reset to 0. Okay, and the same thing for candidates. So now, every time I calculate the total, it's going to change to 0 and start over. So now I can print here. I can say the average for this class, average grade for this class is sum divided by count. So once I do this calculation, then to move on to the next class, everything will be reset to 0 and then move on to the second. So this is much better than, so if you run the program, let me just start new line. So look at this now. So this is more accurate because look, 75, that's for the first one, 25 very low for the second one, and the last one. So this is more accurate than just 87. Here it says the average grade is 87. Oh, now here there is a problem. Why? Because remember, if it changes the grade, it changes to 0. So this one is not going to give you the correct answer. So I'm going to delete that because remember, every time I change it to 0, so I don't use it. Okay, so that's going to give me the average grade for each class. So that will be more helpful and useful than having one single for all classes combined. So this is pretty much how we use the 2D array. Okay, it is, remember, it's an array of arrays. Okay, as I mentioned, so you have more examples if you look over this video, if you watch these videos. I'm just trying to summarize this, but these videos will just give you more explanation. And you don't need to watch this video, the last one, because remember I took off or I removed the programming assignment 11, and this is an explanation of that program. I mean, you can watch it because that's an example of 2D array program. I think it would be very helpful. I would highly recommend that you watch it, even though you are not assigned that assignment, because it shows you how the 2D array works. Okay. So let me spend the rest of the time, a few minutes, about this. So I know like many of you already did the, the video quiz, and then, so as you can see, let me go over this assignment. It's very simple. So here you have an array. So you're going to create an array, and then for simplicity, I put $100, even though you may not need all 100 spots. But remember, to create an array, you have to tell the program how many you have. So make sure you put 100. And then write a program that you're going to prompt the user, like what we did here. While I but you're going to prompt the user to enter all the grade, like 90, 85, like what we did earlier. Okay, and then you're going to find the highest score. Here it's called best score. So we learned how to find the best score. Just go and watch this video again, or one of the other videos. And then instead of like displaying A, B, C based on that grade, whatever you got, so it looks like the instructor here changed the way you are assigned the letter grade by subtracting 10 from the best. If you want to, so if you subtract 10 from the highest, and your grade happens to be, if your grade happens to be higher than whatever the best minus 10, so you're going to use an if else statement, if else, if else, if. So find the best, which is the highest, and then use if else. If your grade, of course, we're going to use the loop. If the grade I, is higher than whatever the best minus 10, then you got A. Else if your grade is higher than best minus 20, you got B. Very simple. There is nothing complicated about this. And then, of course, we have the chapter quiz 7. And then you have the final exam. As you can see, the final exam is not accessible until Monday. but you should take time and make effort to watch this video and also the lecture about the final exam. It's going to be very similar, also very similar to the midterm. Okay. So, and by the way, in the midterm, I added 5 points to every single one of you. So check your grade. If you did not see 5 points added to your grade, then let me know. Maybe I just forgot, or maybe you did not turn it in when I was adding this 5 points. So let me know if your grade is not changed or 5 points was not added to your grade. I think I added all of them, but just in case. So make sure you go over this final exam review and the lecture, and then, as I said, on Monday, but as I said, you don't have to worry about it. If you just watch the video and then you did the midterm and you have no problem, you should have no problem with this one either, okay? Okay, so I'm hoping this video makes things easy for you. I know the last 2 weeks have been, very, very busy and hectic for you. I understand that, but I'm very confident that you can make it, and then you should be able to, finish everything on time, and then you complete the final exam on time. Okay. So thank you so much for the great effort. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out. Thank you. Bye-bye.